Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Uncanny X-Men Annual number 8, and this is cover dated 1984. The cover is by Steve Leialoha. You can see it features transformed versions of the X-Men, including Kitty Pryde and Lockheed there, with who could this be? Well, it will turn out to be a Fairytale version of the White Queen. We've got Wolverine over here, Professor X up there, Colossus here looking like a Transformer, and Nightcrawler over there too. So it's a pretty interesting cover. In the cover corner box, we've got headshots of Storm, Rogue, and Illyana Rasputin, aka Magic from the New Mutants. There's a couple of New Mutants there as well. It looks like Rain and Cannonball. So what is going on with this cover? It certainly intrigues. There's no cover caption to explain anything. We've got to get into the story itself. And there are 40 pages of story and art in this annual, and it opens on the Xavier estate. There is a cookout campfire going on with the X-Men and New Mutants, and Wolverine is telling a campfire story. So you can see 1980s craft technique here, the color hold in the background with illustration of a Japanese house there, or palace, and then these kind of demon ghost-like figures as well in the background. So Wolverine's story, as I said, it's set in Japan, and it features a young samurai, female samurai, and invisible hands pluck at her, exchanging rough warrior's garb for the silken robes of a princess. She's led into a starlit chamber and into the presence of the most beautiful man she had ever seen. So that's the setup there. Let's turn the page. We get a double page spread and a reverse angle on Wolverine telling his story, sitting on a fallen tree trunk there. And you've got the combined members of the X-Men, the roster of X-Men from that era. Professor X is out there too, and the New Mutants over here. So you can see you've even got Warlock there as well. And you've got Kitty Pryde's old dance teacher, Stevie Hunter, present also. So the story, just to get to the bare bones of it, Wolverine says, "The Lord said to the samurai, your destiny awaits. Cast aside that foolish toy, as you will soon the world." The toy there is the sword. She wanted to with all her heart. She had no illusions about her life or future. She was no great beauty, nor had she wealth, and few samurai worth the name died, old or in their beds. She would be alone without home or family, with none to mourn her passing or remember that she had ever been. Yet she did not move. "My sword is my soul," she said with quiet finality. "I will not part with it. I'm sworn to the service of my Lord, Great One. I cannot in honor abandon him. This is who I am. If I do not remain true to myself, then how am I worthy of you or your love? Forgive me, but I cannot go with you." And then Wolverine concludes the story there. "She felt the greatest of winds and heard the most terrible of cries, and found herself standing alone and naked atop the barren hill, holding her sword. For love she had been offered the universe, and in love had refused it." Now, where is this coming in relation to Uncanny X-Men continuity? Well, it comes after issue 183, where the X-Men returned from Secret Wars Battleworld, and where Colossus, after his romantic relationship with Zaji, broke up with Kitty Pryde. And Kitty was pretty upset in issue 183, and she thought about leaving the X-Men. So, one of the functions of stories is to indirectly comment on certain situations or get messages across to people. And it may be that there's a message between the lines of Wolverine's story to Kitty Pryde about maybe how she ought to put duty above love and stay with the X-Men. Also, in terms of where this comes in relation to continuity, Storm here has lost her powers. So she's been out in the woods gathering firewood for the campfire. And she says here, "My apologies if I startled anyone." And Professor X thinks to himself, Aurora has withdrawn so deeply into herself since her powers were taken from her. I want to help her deal with her loss, but she won't let me. So this puts this story coming after issue 185, where she did lose her powers, and likely 186 as well, where subsequent to that she spent time with Forge in Dallas, Texas. So she's returned from there to the X-Men minus her powers and struggling to deal with their loss. So Kitty here gets it. Aurora must feel so awful. I think I could handle losing my phasing talent, but her elemental powers made her one with the earth and maybe even life itself. This isn't fair. It isn't right. She never did anyone any harm. Why'd this have to happen to her? So let's turn the page and continue. And we have Nightcrawler there. Amanda Sefton, his girlfriend of the era, is with him too. And she notes that Colossus is in a funk. And so she goes over to him and she says, "Cookouts like this, Peter Nikolovich, are meant to be enjoyed." "I'm not in the mood," he says. "Care to talk about it?" And he explains, "I fell in love and she died, sacrificing her life for mine. I feel obligated to her, Amanda. I feel I have to remain true to her memory." So that was at the climax of Secret Wars, which of course was written by Jim Shooter, not Chris Claremont. But Claremont responding to the events of Secret Wars in terms of how they would pan out in the emotional lives of the X-Men, because that is the way that he wrote the characters in his original 16-year run. He wrote them, he said, very often and in many places like they were real people, and so he was most particularly concerned with their emotional lives and the decisions they would make on the basis of their feelings and the things that were happening to them in the world. So Peter says here, everyone here views that as a betrayal of the love I once felt for Kitty. I'm beginning to believe that myself. And we saw that in issue 183. You'll find a review of it on the channel, where Wolverine took Colossus into the city and gave him a tough talk about his treatment of Kitty Pryde. And Kitty herself is wise to the fact that Wolverine may have been getting indirectly at her love situation. "Lovely story, Wolverine," she says to him, "trying to tell me something maybe about what I just went through in Japan." So that's a reference to another thing that was out in 84, the Wolverine and Kitty miniseries, but I don't think she's quite getting it. He's not talking about that so much as her situation with the breakup, the aftermath of the breakup with Colossus, and the decision to go back to her parents and maybe leave the X-Men forever. He says, "Who me, Kitty? Perish the thoughts. Have a marshmallow." So it's getting late. The professor thinks that maybe it's time to bring the festivities of the cookout to an end, but the New Mutants are there. "No, boo, hiss, meanie, we're not tired. Another story, Professor, please." And who steps in to tell a story except for Illyana? Now remember, Illyana has been aged up because of the time she was an abductee of Belasco in his demonic dimension. So she's all grown up from issue 153, when it was Kitty Pryde who told a bedtime story to a young Illyana Rasputin. And in that bedtime story, that fairy tale story, Kitty told the story of the Dark Phoenix saga, but with a happy ending. So we're going to get a kind of replay of that here in the subsequent story that forms the main meat of this 40-page annual story. So there's also a side bet in the background where Wolverine says, $5 says Illyana won't make the kid laugh. That's Kitty Pryde. "You're on, Mr. Logan," says Stevie Hunter. And "wish me luck, Lockheed," says Illyana. So Illyana is going to include Lockheed in the story. And notice the inking style here from Steve Leialoha. It's his pencils, his inks, but he seems to be aping somewhat or imitating somewhat the inking style of Bill Sienkiewicz on New Mutants for the, I'm going to call it the bookending sequences. And then his inking style changes for the central fantastical fairy tale story. So Illyana begins the story Ready or not, Kitty, here it comes. In keeping with a recent caper of my own, a reference to New Mutants 21, which was written by Claremont and drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz. She says, Illyana says, I'm calling this The Adventures of Lockheed, the Space Dragon, and his pet girl, Kitty. So, in the Fairytale of Uncanny X-Men 153, there was some adventuring, swashbuckling, kind of pirate theme to it, and we're going to get a little bit more of that here in this story, which is kind of like a sci-fi fantasy drawing on Star Wars, Star Trek, and a little bit of sword and sorcery fairy tale as well, all blended together. So there's an attack on this ship, and the ship is the Chicago. The Starliner Chicago is suddenly viciously ambushed by the most fearsome pirates on the spaceways. So of course, Kitty Pryde is from Chicago. Into the story, Chicago's well armed, and her crew give a superb account of themselves to no avail. So there's a disaster on the ship. Who's responsible for it? This robot comes in and grabs Kitty Pryde. She's a young girl there in the story, and she is brought to none other than the White Queen, and she has her consort there as well, the Black King. So this is like a fairy tale transformed version of Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw and the Hellfire Club. And the White Queen says, you, dear Catherine, like this precious vessel, now belong to us. And this calls back to Uncanny X-Men issues 151 and 52, where Kitty Pryde went to the Massachusetts Academy run by Emma Frost. And of course there was an adventure there, body swap between the White Queen and Storm as well. And you can find my reviews of those issues in the back catalogue of videos on the channel. So Claremont is kind of like, via Illyana's fairy tale campfire story, revisiting some of the story beats and elements of the previous couple of years of Uncanny X-Men stories, as they pertain most particularly to Kitty. So the White Queen says here, you possess powers and abilities that I desire and will stop at nothing to obtain. From this moment you will serve me. In time you will come to love me and eventually become just like me. And Kitty demurs. She says, the heck I will. And the White Queen responds, you doubt me? Very well then, a small demonstration is in order. Arise, girl, give me your hand. So why? And the White Queen says, you will not be harmed. And then she turns her hand to ice. We are one, dear heart, she says, bound for all eternity. But in desperation, Kitty does something she'd never done before. She phases through the deck beneath her feet and she escapes. Fascinating, says the White Queen. There's more to this child than I suspected. When she interfaced with that console, she completely disrupted its systems. I want her found and captured immediately. And then this little kind of Nightcrawler looking demon says, robotic demon says, Mistress, scanner contact, another Starcraft intercept course closing fast. So the complications in the plot will continue, but a little observation here that this version of the White Queen, where she's an ice queen and where she's got ice powers, reminds me of C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and the encounter between Lucy, Pevensey and Jadis the White Witch. And the theme in terms of what way would Lucy grow up? Would Lucy grow up to be a cold-hearted, beautiful, selfish, narcissistic woman like Jadis, the White Witch? Or would she retain her soul? So that's the kind of fairy tale world that we're getting here in Illyana's story. And it kind of is tapping into, or rather it's responding to and developing what Wolverine was trying to say to Kitty with his samurai fairy tale. But this is the one that gets elaborated into a full story. So what's this ship here? An instant later, the pirate vessel is struck by a monstrous blast of raw flame. So who dares to attack the White Queen and her ship? Far from the bridge, cadres of heavily armed warriors rush confidently towards their foe. Unfortunately for them, they quickly find Wolverine, coming at them. So this is a transformed version of Wolverine for the Fairytale. Nightcrawler 2, using his acrobatic skills, a prehensile tail, and most importantly the ability to teleport to excellent advantage. So Nightcrawler and Wolverine, these old pals, are a team here in this Fairytale. But who or what is this in the darkness, with red eyes and smoke emerging from not its nose but something else? So we'll see shortly. Meanwhile, Kitty's lost in the ship. I fell through solid objects like a ghost, but I'm real. I'm scared. I want my mommy. What's that? And then there's a big roar. And so who is this in the shadows, with a beak and these wings here? And then Kitty is found. You've led me a merry chase, young lady, but did you really believe you could hide forever? So Kitty responds, leave me alone, you witch. And Emma Frost, or rather I should call her the White Queen for the story, has found Kitty's parents. And she says she's going to punish Kitty by turning them to ice and killing them. Always remember, Catherine, the fault for this is yours alone. So this is interesting because, of course, Kitty's parents at this point had separated. They were divorced. And there's kind of Illyana's stories playing around with that bereavement, that Kitty's lost her parents as a married couple, and she's lost her boyfriend, or prospective boyfriend, in Peter Rasputin. And the prospect is maybe she'll grow up to be a cold-hearted woman like the White Queen in this fairy tale. That's kind of like what Claremont's playing around with in the story. But then there's a roar from off panel, and the White Queen escapes with her Black King, leaving Kitty to her fate. So let's turn the page, and it is this dragon that has arrived, but he's a little cute tiny dragon the size of a dog, and slaps her on the face with his nose there. So it's Lockheed, of course. I like the art on this particular page. I think that Leialoha does a good job with Lockheed, and does some good acting with the dragon as well, in terms of the dragon's facial expressions and grins and so on and so forth. It is whimsical but charming, I think. So then Nightcrawler arrives. Lockheed, we've searched or scanned the entire ship. The pirates have retreated to their own vessel. And then he spies little Kitty. Wolverine comes along as well, and she says, I don't believe this. Are you guys for real? Are you friendly? I guess you must be. I'm still alive. And Wolverine says, stands to reason, pumpkin. You're pretty lucky, you know. The rest of the crew and passengers either croaked or are in the pirates' slaver holds. Engines and computers a mess too. Chicago can't travel and she can't fight. She's a sitting duck. And Kitty there is aghast, but this is my home. It can't be wrecked. My parents. And Wolverine says, kid. And she responds, I'm not a kid. I'm Kitty. It's my fault they died. My fault everyone died. The Queen said so. And you believe her? It was me she wanted. Even if that were true, Liebling says, Nightcrawler, she can't ever win unless you let her. That what you want? No, she replies. But where can I go? What will become of me? Join you. Oh, may I? So she's kind of understood Lockheed's offer there. Lockheed is the leader, if you can believe it, to join them. And so she's going to have a sense of belonging now with these space pirates. And off they teleport to reappear aboard Lockheed's Star Cruiser. And there's kind of like an AI computer, and it's Illyana, the persona of our ship. And Kitty asks, is she alive? And Illyana responds, I certainly like to think so. I mark strategic ordnance being released by the pirate vessel targeted on Chicago. So it's time for an emergency exit. And that's their cue to Vamoose. And look at the way that Lockheed's ship is kind of patterned on his form and shape. So like the front of the ship is like patterned on his head there. That's kind of amusing. As the cruiser leaps into hyperspace, a new star dawns in the heavens behind them. under the cover of that supernova scale explosion, the villains also make good their escape. So this is the opening of the story completed, and Kitty now is a member of Lockheed Space Pirates with Nightcrawler and Wolverine. So we get this kind of collage page of their adventures over days and weeks, hard days and harder nights, haunted by terrifying dreams wherein the White Queen beckons, and Kitty, to her horror, races joyfully to her side. She wakes sobbing, sometimes screaming, to always find Lockheed by her side. He never leaves her. So it's like his friendship and love for her redeems her from becoming cold-hearted like the White Queen. Eventually, though, both tears and nightmares fade, and Kitty becomes a full-fledged member of Lockheed's intrepid band of freelance freebooters, roaming the galaxy, bringing law and justice to their wild and woolly corner of the cosmos. Yet, for all their success, the foes Kitty most longs to meet remain tantalizingly absent. So she's out to get revenge on the White Queen for the loss of her parents and former life. And there's a bit of fun too, because they've been summoned by Charles Xavier, Senior of the Spiral Arm, so Lord of the Spiral Arm of the Galaxy, to help him celebrate his Jubilee. So she's got to get a fancy dress for the party, and we've got a little reference here to I'm trying to remember the precise issue, I think 158 of Uncanny X-Men, where there was a gizmo on the Shi'ar ship that she used to change costumes and also present herself as Dark Phoenix. But unnoticed during Kitty's impromptu fashion show, Lockheed gazes out at the stars, an expression of ineffable longing on his face. So there he is, looking out the window of the ship, as if listening to a song only he can hear. They touch down at the Imperial Starport on the grounds of Xavier's Palace Royale, a backyard roughly the size of Brazil. So a huge domain. To be greeted not only by Xavier and his consort, the Shi'ar Empress Lilandra, but the entire Imperial Guard, the proudest, bravest, most noble knights in all the realm. So there they are. And one of them stands out in particular to Kitty, and that is Peter. And she says, he isn't just cute, he's gorgeous. But Lockheed isn't impressed. Face front, kiddo. Wolverine says to her, you're going to get us in trouble. And then they're welcomed, and the Xavier, or the version of Professor X in this Fairytale comes forward, and he says, I notice, young Kitty, one of my knights finds favour in your eyes. And she says, I was hoping it didn't show. And he says, I fear it's next to impossible to keep secrets from a telepath, though I try never to pry into others' thoughts. But then he telepathically communicates to her, would it help any if I told you those feelings are returned? So she's delighted by that, but Lockheed isn't impressed. And Xavier says, shall I introduce you? Lockheed flies off because something else has got his attention. Where's he going? But Kitty's only got eyes for Peter. And I like the little detail of the love hearts there at the side of her speech balloons. That's well done by Tom Orzechowski, because Orzechowski is the letterer. The credits come on the last page. So let's see. We've got Wolverine here, and he's got doubts about the love between Kitty and Peter. And he says to Nightcrawler, mind the store, will you? I'm going to keep an eye on the dragon. So he goes after Lockheed, and he thinks, Lockheed's usually more polite than this. Seems to me he was answering some kind of call. Kitty'd have noticed too if she hadn't been making goo-goo eyes at Rasputin. No accounting for taste. He's a nice enough boy, but nowhere near in her league. So Lockheed leads a merry chase into the oldest, most run-down district of Xavier's throne city. Let's turn the page. But back at the palace, there's the grand ball. Everything's going well there. And so we've got the grand ball intercut with Lockheed going down these narrow streetways. And then he's attacked by a whole load of dragons. And Wolverine sees it as an ambush. I knew this was a setup. Hang on, boss. I'll have you out of here in a jiffy. And he thinks to himself, cripes, dare dragons, where'd they come from? We always figured Lockheed was unique. He doesn't know either. He looks as surprised as me. So all of these kinds of details are true to the regular reality, where we never have gotten the full origin story of Lockheed, and there are certain mysteries concerning him. So they're getting explored here in Illyana's fairy tale. And then he's gone, and the dragon's with him. So what happened? But not all of them. There's one left. Look at the way it's kind of backed up against the wall, kind of like a cat or a dog. Growl away, darling, says Wolverine. Before I'm done, you'll tell me everything I want to know. But then he's caught in a frigibeam, like an ice beam, by the White Witch. Well, that's you see, I'm thinking of the line "The Witch in the Wardrobe" by the White Queen. And so she's captured Wolverine and that dragon. That dragon is not Lockheed, remember. And at the grand ball, Kitty and Peter are dancing. And then somebody speaks from off panel. Good evening, my precious Kitty, Kitty. So she recognizes the voice. It's the White Queen. Turn the page. Get past the advertisements. And there she is. It's like a holographic broadcast or something like that. Merely a holographic projection. There you go, projection. I've brought you a present, Charles, in honor of your birthday, she says. Kitty, did you believe I'd foregone my rightful vengeance? Not so. Wolverine is my guest, dear heart. Surrender yourself, fulfill the destiny I set for you years ago, lest I do unto him and then to all your companions what she does to the dragon, which is turn him to ice and destroy him. Well, Kitty thinks it's Lockheed, but it's not. It's the female dragon that was in the alleyway with Wolverine. And Kitty here is irate, murdering witch, she exclaims. I won't give up or give in, and I swear you'll never harm anyone else again. I won't rest until I find you, until one of us is dead. And so here she is, holding out that arm that is still being transformed to ice, which is an intriguing kind of symbol of the fact that, she's got two different paths in front of her in terms of the woman she'll become. And so Illyana, the ship's computer, says in terms of the trail of Wolverine and the dragon, she says, there's also a residual presence of the White Queen and her goons, but overlaying them all is a unique energy pattern, the like of which I've never seen. It leads off into space. The trail's quite distinctive. It's also the only one we've got. I'll have no trouble following it. So Kitty says, let's get flying then. So she takes over the leadership role in the absence of Wolverine and Lockheed. We've lost too much time already. And she invites Peter to come along. And Xavier says, take care, Kitty. The Queen is a most formidable foe, and her hatred for you knows no bounds. So the Queen here, it seems that when she kind of freezes and kills or shatters any creature, that she extracts life essence as well, which is intriguing here. She's taken some of Kitty's life essence then, perhaps, is the implication of that. And they've determined, her subjects have determined that it is extra-dimensional in origin, the source of the life essence, and possessed of extraordinary power. So now they want to locate it and exploit it. That's what the Black King is suggesting. And she says, we could even challenge Xavier with the power. This galaxy, this entire dimension might well be ours for the taking. And you can see there she's got Wolverine trapped in ice. The ice is melting a little bit, which is interesting because it implies he's fighting against being encased in the ice. And then one of these servitors comes in. Majesty Lockheed's starship has lifted off from Throne World. So she says, splendid, activate our cloaking screen and follow at a discreet distance. We'll let those heroic dolts blaze our path. They'll spring any traps, be the first to confront any opposition. If they fall along the way, they'll be dead, and will profit from their mistakes. If they succeed, they'll no doubt be so drained by their struggles they'll be easy pickings for us. Either way, we win. So Kitty, though, has gone in search of a pilot, and this little sequence here in the backgrounds remind me of Jean Giraud, the French comics artist known as Mobius. There's something about the style of this alien world here and the creatures on it that remind me of his work, and it implies to me that Leialoha must have been familiar with Mobius's work. Anyway, Kitty is there and she's in search of a pilot, and there's some little funny moments as well. And then the pilot that she's interested in turns out to be the Fairytale version of Storm, who is in her cups and in despair. So Kitty introduces herself and she says, "You're the Star Rider? What's it look like to you, baby?" So Kitty thinks to herself, so much for this idea, but I've got to try. I need a pilot. So Storm replies, "I don't fly anymore, not even for Lockheed," asks Kitty. "Go away, girl, he's dead and I'm busy." "So I see, I'll pay any price if I have to, I'll beg," says Kitty. And Storm replies, "Waste a breath, helps not mine to give. Even if I wanted to, I don't fly because I can't." So we're getting Storm's situation in the real world explored here in the transformed, heightened reality of the fairy tale that Illyana is telling. She's got points she's making, not just to Kitty, but also to Storm. Rogue is here too, and she seems to be like a minder of Storm's. But Kitty gives Storm a pep talk. She says, life got too tough, so you figured you'd crawl into this hole and rot? And Storm says, "There isn't much else to do." "Bull," says Kitty. "There are other ways to fly. They aren't the same." "No, they might be better," says Kitty. "Finding out involves taking a chance, risking failure and the pain of disappointment. It's easier to convince yourself from the start there's no hope, to feel sorry for yourself and let your grief and misery fester like a cancer. If that's how you feel, the heck with you. We'll go by ourselves. Whether we succeed or fail, we'll have at least tried." So that's kind of like a core message in the fairy tale story for both Peter in the real world, Storm in the real world, and also Kitty herself. And then Rogue interrupts here, but Storm gets up and she interrupts and says, "I'm enough, children. I make no promises, kitten, but Lockheed was an old dear friend. For his sake and in his memory, I'll try to pilot the ship." Now, just this little panel here, you can see like the different styles that Leialoha is drawing on. So Storm here, like looking bedraggled, but then it looks like she's shaking herself up. And she looks here, the drawing just reminds me of Jaime Hernandez in this particular panel. So I'm just getting a sense of what Leialoha's artistic influences might have been back in 1984. As I said, I've seen a bit of Mobius and now I'm seeing a little bit of Jaime Hernandez. Let me know your thoughts, as well as what I said earlier about the Bill Sienkiewicz inking influence for the book ending parts of this 40-page story. Then back with the White Queen. She's there lording it over Wolverine encased in the ice still, and she's thinking about the fact it doesn't matter that Storm is going to be their pilot. Poor dears, rushing headlong into oblivion, while we, thanks to the data extracted from our dragon, will be able to traverse the passage between dimensions with ease. "Your friends are doomed, Wolverine," she says, "my darling, and there's nothing you can do about it." So here's Storm piloting Lockheed's ship in tandem with the Illyana AI computer. And, it's a question, or rather it's a challenge for her confidence. She thinks to herself, "I must expand my awareness, actually feel in mind and body the shape of space around me. I could do that once. I was more at home here than on any planet. My powers made me one with the cosmos. I'm a fool," she thinks. "What was lost can never be regained. But Kitty depends on me. The slightest mistake will destroy us utterly." So she swings around. She can't do it. She's got doubts. And then Kitty gives her a pep talk. Being crippled doesn't make you so special. You're not the only person who's ever suffered, Ororo. I want to run away too. I want to scream and cry and grieve. I'm tired of fighting and being hurt. And so the frozen forearm represents all of that. So why go on? Asks Storm. Too darn stubborn, I guess, she says. Let's turn the page. Life's too short and precious to be wasted. Lockheed taught me that, she says. And now you pass it on? Asks Storm. Yup. So Kitty concludes, look on the bright side. You can do through skill what you used to do through talent. It's the perfect opportunity to prove you really are the best. So that pep talk was sufficient. Storm is going to go for it again. And then they go through the black hole, because the black hole is the doorway to the other dimension where the dragon energy leads to. And then we can see the way it's kind of represented here on the other side of the black hole with the stars in blackness. And then the ship descends onto the surface of a planet with crystal mountains bigger than the Himalayas. And someone asks, have we found the White Queen's homeworld, do you think? Is that why no one ever tracked her down? Oh, so it was Kitty asking that. And Storm replies, I doubt it, kitten. Kitty, Ororo, I mark a familiar contact just ahead. It can't be, but I think it is. That's Illyana computer. Who Illyana what? So it's Lockheed. So Lockheed has been discovered. So they're going to find out now it wasn't him who was killed by the White Queen. So everybody gets into their armor. Beam us down, orders Kitty. Turn the page. And there they are on the surface of this planet. And there they find Lockheed, and he's surrounded by hundreds of dragons, and they're all female. All is well, Ororo, says Nightcrawler. Lockheed is indeed alive and unharmed, albeit perhaps a trifle worn out. Oh, says Storm. Oh, indeed. This Drakic community seems to be entirely female. The problem, I wager, will not be saving the poor darling, but persuading him to leave. So he has been, how shall we put it, like making dragon love with all these female dragons. And then their ship is attacked by, of course, the White Queen. There she is with the Black King. And Kitty goes to attack her. So there's a fight here. And then there emerges this massive matriarchal dragon. And it looks like Wolverine asks, is she the ruler of this place? No, rather, Peter does. Is she the ruler of this place, comrades? What all these little dragons will become? And Kitty, is it Kitty replies there? Who cares, Petey? No, it's Rogue. Who cares, Petey? The goons are scattering. The big lizards got him on the ropes. Way to go, honey. So in her prime, the matriarch could have laid waste a world, but no longer. Age has taken its toll, leaving her vulnerable to the pirates' weapons. So Kitty jumps over the head of the dragon, going after the White Queen. So there's all kinds of fighting and blasting going on here. Peter says, we're holding our own, Katja, but our efforts mean nothing so long as the Queen's starship remains in orbit above us. From orbit, it can blast us to atoms. So Kitty's got a plan. Leave that problem to me, Peter. So she calls out for Lockheed. Let's fly, dragon, before I realise how off the wall crazy this stunt is. So she tells Lockheed she missed him. He asks, yeah, I'm glad you're okay. I just wanted you to know. So the plan is she's holding on to him as he flies her up to the pirate ship, the White Queen's pirate ship, and they phase into the ship. As she runs out of air, Kitty focuses her concentration and phases the two of them through the starship's hull. Really like this sequence. I think it's really well handled by Steve Leialoha. And then they're in the ship. And so here are these kind of robot warriors, and Lockheed reduces them to slag with his dragon flame. We'll split up, Lockheed, says Kitty. I'll sabotage the computer. You find Wolvie. So then the information of the breach is given to the Black King, and he says Lockheed's the primary threat. So these servitors are going to guide him to Lockheed. He blasts Lockheed there. But Wolverine is free because Lockheed melted the ice that Wolverine was entrapped in. Boss thought I might want to be in on the action, so he thawed me out, he says, as he attacks the Black King. And it's implied he kills him because the White Queen loses the Psylink with him. It's been severed, and the ship won't answer my comm calls. So Kitty arrives, Wolverine too, Lockheed. Kitty snaps her fingers, she says, "Tough ain't it, Queenie? Balanced the scales, paid some debts." And what did the snap of the fingers bring? "You may have slain my consort and destroyed my vessel," says the White Queen, "but it's a triumph you'll not live to enjoy." And this is it. This is like the climax of the question as to what Kitty's future path would be and how she would develop. "You forget our souls are bound," says the White Queen. "You're more like me than you will ever admit. With my psi powers, I can exchange our psyches." But Kitty resists. The White Queen says resistance is futile. "You're no match for me." And Kitty retorts, "That, Queenie, is where you're wrong. I'm not a baby. Thanks to all you've done, I'm your equal and more. You're finished. You'll never hurt anyone or turn any more kids into orphans or frighten me ever again." So Kitty's faced her enemy and beaten her. Will she kill her? "So shoot then," exclaims the White Queen. "What are you waiting for? Haven't you the courage?" Kitty replies, "I faced you on your terms, with your weapons, and won. I don't want your life anymore, lady. I don't need it." And the White Queen responds, "Sanctimonious little fool, your benevolence will cost you dearly when next we meet." But what came of Kitty snapping her fingers? It's this: just because I'm through with you doesn't mean you're free. You still have them to answer to. So it's all of the female dragons, and they burn the White Queen to a crisp. Kitty doesn't listen to her screams. "I know. I lied, you know," she says to Lockheed as she covers his eyes. "The scales aren't balanced. They'll never be, now that I've lost you." Oh yeah, because she thinks that the White Queen, or rather that, let me see here, that Lockheed was injured by the Black King. Let me just go back a page just to double check on that, what happened there. Yeah, so that's it. Like the Black King, when he shot Lockheed, so Kitty picked up Lockheed. You can see his tongue hanging out there. And so she says, oh yeah, there's this little encounter between Peter and Kitty here, where Peter says, "I grieve for your loss, Katya. I hope I can make it up to you." And she replies, "I'm afraid, Colossus, you can't. I thought what I felt for you was love, but I was wrong. You're a dear friend. I'll always care for you, but Lockheed, I'm so sorry, Peter. I never meant to lead you on." So he says he understands, and she says, "It's like someone's torn out my heart. All my life, after my folks died, whenever I needed someone, he was there, drying my tears, making me laugh, giving strength, sympathy, love. But when he needed me, I was with somebody else." Let's turn the page. And then from her grief over betraying Lockheed or not being there for him, she cries tears, and they refresh and restore him. And there he is. He licks her cheek. So that's a great little sequence as well, artistically speaking. So she's delighted. So we're getting the happy ending of the story. And Storm here says that she's just learned to live again. "I'm far from ready to give that up." So she's over the trauma of losing her powers as well. And then Lockheed here is surrounded by all the female dragons. Kitty says, "Pretty popular fella and a pretty signal honor, Papa, to an entire race of dragons." Let's turn the page. So what happens now is that Kitty is going to leave Lockheed behind on, let's call it Dragon World, in the Dragon Dimension. And so they come out the other side of the black hole back into our dimension. And Kitty here has a heart-to-heart with Storm. "I thought everything was turning out great. Now I feel more miserable than ever." And Storm replies, "You could have forced him to come with us." She says, "No, he'd have hated me for it, and I'd have hated myself. He made his free choice, as I got to make mine with Colossus." So here are all the lessons coming through in the story about love and breakups, and not giving in to despair, and respecting people's free choices when it comes to breakups. I'm really glad he's happy. I'll just have to get used to the fact that it isn't with me. So Storm says to him, will you survive, kitten, or will I have to seek you out in the darkest corner of the scummiest dive in the cosmos? Give me a break, she says. Gee, I wonder if Aurora can teach me to fly through that singularity. Lockheed'll mind me dropping in for a visit. And so, who's there? It's that tongue on her cheek again. Lockheed's back, so they're having a little dance. A girl and her pet dragon, or her dragon and his pet girl. You see, he'd already done his duty by the dragons, says Illyana. He could have stayed to enjoy a life of unending pleasure, but no way was he going to desert his other self, his truest love. And so they lived happily, albeit adventurously, ever after. So this is interesting because, like I said before, this supplements Wolverine's story of the samurai who was offered the love of this handsome prince of the universe and refused it in favor of duty, which her sword represented, duty to her lord. And Illyana here is suggesting, yeah, there's duty, but there's also friendship too, and that's important. Great story, pal. You put the babies to sleep, so the young New Mutants are asleep. You can see Rain there, asleep in Cannonball's arms. Let's see here. The professor says, be charitable, Catherine. It was a good story, and it is very late. Some of you adults can help me put them to bed, while the rest of you tidy the campsite and extinguish the fire. So Wolverine's won the bet from Stevie Hunter. And she says, Logan says to her rather, don't hear no guffaws, Hunter, you owe me $5. And she says, my pleasure, Logan. A story like that's worth twice the price, especially if Illyana gets away with what I think she was up to. And Logan gets it. I mean, amen to that, darling. So walk you home. Thanks, I'd like that. Now, it's a Chris Claremont comic. I wonder, was there anything more to the walk home between Wolverine and Stevie Hunter? I wouldn't put it past Claremont to be implying there that maybe it wasn't quite the end of the night for these two adults. But then back into Storm. She was listening to the story too. Did she take away a lesson from it? There is solace of a kind when one wallows in self-pity, she says, but not much fun. Perhaps the time has come to leave this nest, as I did my African home years ago when Professor Xavier invited me to join the X-Men. Never know till you try, says Kitty. We've both been through a lot lately. We've suffered, we've been hurt, but we survived, we got better. We'll get better still. Storm concurs. Will I see you again? Aurora asks Kitty. In my heart and soul, dear child, we'll never be apart. So that's Storm heading to Africa in respect of Life Death Part 2, which is issue 198 of Uncanny X-Men. And what about Kitty though and Illyana here? And now for the hard part, says Kitty. So she has gotten the lesson from the story. So she's going to have a emotionally mature talk with Colossus, who was, has isolated himself from the group. Peter waits, she says to him. Is that how you believe it was with me, Kitty? You and Lockheed and I, in the story representing me and you and Zaji? And Kitty says, you never told me her name. It's very beautiful. And Colossus says, I loved her. More than me, says Kitty. I know. It wasn't intentional. Sometimes things happen. If anyone's to blame, it's that dumb Beyonder. I like to think that Claremont means there it's that dumb Jim Shooter. But anyway, Kitty says, but I'd still like us to be friends. Colossus says, I too. So there's some reconciliation there. Beyond that, big guy, who knows, thinks Kitty to herself. And Illyana says, goodness gracious me, demons preserve us. The stone face smiles. Lay off, Illyana. I haven't been that much of a grump. Want to bet? She says. Your turn to walk the dragon pride. I'll douse the fire. And then this is a funny little sequence here where Kitty says to Lockheed, "Miss me, fella? I've been away a long time." So that is the trip to Japan. Gee, he's cute, she thinks, and kind of sees him as like David Bowie, I suppose. And then she wonders, what do you think of me? And he sees her as a female dragon. Sweet dreams, says Illyana. And as Kitty walks away, Illyana, thanks, I owe you. Hey, what are true friends? Not just a true friend, says Kitty, my best friend. And that's intriguing because their friendship is going to be downgraded by the arrival of Rachel Summers. Now, Rachel Summers arrives in issue 184 of Uncanny X-Men, but you can see she's not part of the group there in this story, but she's on the way, and she, in the future, will be Kitty Pryde's best friend. And Claremont was doing, or like at the end of the 80s, worked on a graphic novel with Rick Leonardi that was called True Friends, and was going to tell the story of Kitty Pryde and Rachel Summers, aka Phoenix. And it was unfinished, and then it got finished in 1998-99 when Claremont returned to Marvel. So it is one of his themes that he explores in the course of his writings: female friendships, the young love breakups, the ups and downs of emotions when it comes to feelings of loyalty betrayed and so on and so forth. And he's very good at all of that. And like an intriguing way to explore the aftermath of emotional traumas like Colossus's bereavement, the breakup with Kitty Pryde, Storm losing her powers by means of this fairy tale told by Illyana Rasputin as a kind of reciprocation for Kitty Pryde's fairy tale in issue 153. And here comes the credits at the end of the issue, these kind of cute little spot illustrations as well. The adventures of Lockheed, the space dragon, and his pet girl Kitty. And then our creative team here: Chris Claremont, writer; Steve Leialoha, artist, so that means pencils and inks. And Joe Duffy gets credited with the original idea. So obviously she gave the idea for the fairy tale story to Claremont. Glynis Wine, colorist, and Tom Orzechowski, letterer, rounds out the creative team. Well, I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men Annual number 8 from 1984. Did you pick this one up at the time? What are your memories of it? What are your thoughts on this particular comic? Let me know in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.